Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm one of your hosts for today's live webinar called Cooped Up Kids, Take Learning Outdoors. We have a lot of great information that we're going to cover today in this hour session. Hopefully you're going to be able to take away some of this information and use it for your own needs. So with that said, now I'm going to hand it over to Jen, who will be our main presenter today.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Hi, I'm Jennifer Fee. I work at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, currently located in Ithaca, New York, and we've been working from home since March. So I'm in my home office, and I apologize in advance if my cats decide to interrupt my presentation. Just so it's not distracting, I'll go ahead and turn off my webcam at this time, but I did just want to put a name with a face and welcome everyone personally to the webinar, and thank you so much for coming. All right. Yeah, as Jordan said, feel free to use the chat or question tab as you have things that come up, and we'll go ahead and get started. Why don't we go ahead and practice? I'm just curious whether we can have the access to the chat window. Again, in the control panel, you'll see a chat. If it's possible to send to everyone, you can send to everyone. You may also only be able to send to organizers and panelists. And if you send to organizers and panelists, that'll get to me, Susan, and Jordan. Susan is my colleague at Cornell Lab and helping out with tonight's webinar. So why don't we put in the chat window, if you have the ability, we'll just test this, to say where you're from. And again, if possible, you can send to everyone, and if that's not a drop-down choice, you can send it to organizers and panelists. All right, I see Wisconsin. Welcome. I should have welcomed you to say your name as well in the chat window if you'd like.
All right, it looks like we're getting some in the questions tab. Kim stated that she cannot type in the chat, but others are saying, yep, like Linda, she's from Griffin, Georgia. Jane's from Cincinnati. So we got some people that are actually typing in the questions tab right now.
Great, thanks Jordan. All right, well, I'm excited to share this theme with you tonight about cooped up kids and encourage you to take learning outdoors. Right before the webinar, I just took a few minutes to go on a brisk walk around my neighborhood because it's fall here in Ithaca. The weather is gorgeous and it's sunny. And you know, after sitting at my desk all day long working on the computer, it felt so good to get outside. And I know that's probably how you and your students will feel too, especially if you're feeling cooped up lately, especially with everything that's going on in the world right now. And I do want to thank Jordan and our friends at Nasco for co-hosting this webinar for us. We've been working with Nasco for the past few years to develop some kits that go in their catalogs, and I'll show you those kits at the end of the webinar. So many of you may not be super familiar with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I'll explain who we are alongside the benefits of outdoor learning. We'll define what citizen science is. I really want to share some of the Cornell Lab resources, almost all of them free resources that include simple nature-based activities. And hopefully at the end, if I don't get derailed and talk your ear off on these topics, which are near and dear to my heart, there'll be time for questions and discussion as well. So as I said, I work at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and I've been the manager of K-12 education there for about 10 years. I've been in Ithaca for 17 years working at the lab. We are a nonprofit institution that's affiliated with Cornell University, and our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. And I think I have one of the best jobs at the lab because I really get to engage teachers and families and youth in all three parts of our mission. Help share out the cool science and research that's going on at the lab, do it in a fun, educational way, and also try to involve kids, families, and teachers in our citizen science projects. And if that term citizen science isn't something that's familiar to you, I will give you a definition in just a little while. Maybe some of you are longtime people who are concerned about nature-based learning. About 10 years ago, the book Last Child in the Woods came out by Richard Louv. And this was kind of a wake-up call for many educators, and especially environmental educators. He talked about what he called nature deficit disorder, basically the problems associated with kids who are these days getting outside less and less, especially for outdoor play and sort of free-form learning. So kids, even back 10 years ago, we were starting to understand that they were having sensory issues, attention difficulties, and higher rates of physical and emotional diseases, physical issues like obesity, for example. So there are a lot of implications, spiritual, social, environmental, and physical. And I would call myself an environmental educator, and I really think part of the spiritual and environmental issues with not having enough time outside is lack of connection to, or sense of place, lack of connection to the local environment. And also that leads to, I think, some conservation issues as well, because generally people don't care about places or animals that they are not themselves familiar with. So my personal interest in this topic is both as an educator and trying to get kids connected to their local environment and outside, and also as a parent as well of a 9-year-old who is in love with devices and who sometimes I feel like I have to push her outside. So I come at this from both angles. If you're interested in the research around the benefits of getting kids outside, I'd refer you to the Children in Nature Network. Many of these links are going to be sent to you in a PDF that's available right after this presentation. We'll just send it to you via email, so you don't have to necessarily scribble all these notes down, because those links will be available to you. But you know, for adults and kids alike, I mean, healthy eyes and vitamin D, physical activity, social emotional well-being, and all of these are research-based. For kids, some of the common problems you might see in your classrooms or programs, like attention deficit, time outside, in some cases even time spent looking outside at a green space, can boost focus and attention and decrease ADHD symptoms, can improve behavior, for example, more impulse control and less disruptive behavior, and better academic performance and increased engagement and enthusiasm academically. So taking your kids outside, while it can feel, I think, sometimes for teachers as perhaps one more thing to do or one more thing to worry about, there are some research-based benefits of getting kids outside, so much so that you might find that the classroom issues that you're facing could be mitigated by taking kids outside. And again, this is pulled from the Children in Nature Network, all the benefits of time in nature: health, social, self-esteem, academic, pro-environment behaviors, all of these things that I've been talking about. So if you want to actually read the research and find out more details, or you need to sell this, for example, to your administration, those resources are absolutely out there. Now, that said, whenever we had you register, we asked you a question, which was, what were your concerns about taking kids outside? And none of them were a surprise to me. You know, there's a lack of activities out there, especially if you've not done environmental education or outdoor education before, or tried to take your kids outside for learning. Also, a lot of concerns about things, practical things like weather and classroom management. And I'm hoping that as we move through today's presentation, maybe you'll be thinking about some of the solutions to some of these problems and challenges that maybe are kind of itching in the back of your head, like, how am I going to do this? Maybe your main issue is time or administration support, or you're afraid that your kids won't be well behaved. And as I was thinking about this, it's just happened to come across my Facebook feed this morning, so I stuck it in at the last minute. And I think these are a good way to change our framing, both for myself as an educator and also myself as a parent. Changing the frame from being careful, don't get wet, you might hurt someone, and kind of cautionary tales when you're outside, to framing it in a more positive way. Instead of be careful, notice how, or don't get wet. Well, we're not wearing the right gear for that today, or to go out in this weather, but next time let's do it, or how could we do it next time? So kind of changing your frame might help you get over the hump to taking your kids outside more. And as I was looking over again those concerns that folks cited in the pre-survey, I just wanted to lay out a few practical tips that me and my team came up with in preparation for this, just so that you can go into this presentation thinking maybe positively about ways that you could problem solve based on the benefits that there are to getting kids outside, to possibly push yourself to do it a little bit more. Some practical tips that we found: if possible, take smaller groups out, maybe split your class in two if that's possible, and or recruiting an extra adult. One thing that's worked well for us, if we have an extra adult, is to sandwich the kids between two leaders, and that can work at kindergarten level or at high school level. Like the first adult leader is at the front, the last adult leader is always at the back, and you kind of corral the kids that way if you've got some safety concerns. This is old hat for anybody who does a lot of outdoor behavior, and probably in-class behavior too. If you have the students come up with the rules for their behavior, they're more likely to follow them, especially if they come up with the consequences for unsafe behaviors, which might be, next time we go out, you don't get to go out with a group, or, well, if we can't go outside safely, then they're going to be, we're not going to be able to go outside as a class again. I saw a lot of concerns about weather when I read the survey responses. So when I was thinking about that, I think, being flexible with your dates. If the weather is truly terrible, could you switch the date to tomorrow or next week, whenever maybe the weather is a little bit better? Many of the teachers that we've worked with have a stash of hats and gloves and rain gear, and even plastic bags that can go over shoes, or require that their kids always have an extra pair of boots or something like that. And I understand in certain schools that might be a stretch to be able to have enough hats and gloves and rain gear to cover the kids that don't have those materials. But hopefully that can help, by sending reminders to parents to, send their kids to school well dressed, especially when you're planning to go outside, and or have a stash of things to pull out whenever that's not possible. And of course, that is a little bit perhaps problematic right now when we're thinking about maintaining social distance and not sharing materials. But as time passes and things go back to normal, then I think that some of those things will become a little bit easier for you as well. So if you have any tips that you'd like to share, whether in the chat or in the Q&A box, feel free to add them. And you can also just write ideas down that you think of that we can revisit later. Hopefully at the end of this presentation, we'll have a little bit of extra time to do that. So with that said, let me just give you a little bit of an introduction to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and our mission, especially in K-12, and give you that definition of citizen science before I launch into a litany of fun resources that you might like to try. So our mission is to provide innovative resources and training that build science skills while inspiring young people to connect to local habitats, explore biodiversity, engage in citizen science projects. And over the last 10 years, I really come to see these themes as interconnected. what I'm going to talk about largely today is in that first box, just getting kids connected to nature, taking them outside. It does not have to be for a long time. I've had some teachers have success with things like a field Friday, where maybe they go outside only for 15 minutes Friday afternoon after lunch or recess or end of the day, just to give the kids a little scavenger hunt or something to do outdoors. Moving up the line to citizen science projects, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, which is a little bit maybe longer term and involves some learning and contributing data to projects. And then what we found teachers say again and again is, wow, when I take kids outside, the kids ask amazing questions. They get curious about things, and that can be a jumping off point into doing scientific investigations or scientific inquiry. What is citizen science? Since we don't really have access to the chat window, it seems, I won't have you type this in. But citizen science, most people will think of gathering data. And citizen science projects are broad, and they're accessible from the youngest students on up to older adults. And we've got a variety of projects at the lab, but there are projects nationwide as well. Here you've got a little boy monitoring a nest box. You've got some kids doing some insect collection. You've got some stream ecology studies, bird watching, monarch tagging. Lots of different projects. And what these projects tend to have in common is these volunteers, laymen, whether students or adults, can partner with scientists to answer real-world questions. And for me, an important part of the definition of citizen science is that there's a scientific question that the scientists are actually interested in. And kids find this super motivating because they're like, oh my gosh, you mean our data really goes to Cornell University? You know, when we're collecting data about birds and birdhouses or at feeders or just out in fields or on schoolyards, yeah, your data really matters, and it allows our scientists to understand large scale what is happening with the populations of birds. It helps us answer real world questions. And as I hinted a couple of slides ago, there are many citizen science projects. So if birds aren't your thing, which hopefully maybe by the end of this, I can convince you that birds are in fact the best organism on the planet. We have projects and our partner organizations and friends have projects on ants and squirrels and ladybugs and many, many other things. CocoRa's, for example, is the community rain and snow and hail network. So it's a community weather monitoring project. Journey North is a project that many teachers are familiar with. They have projects about robin arrivals and earthworms and all sorts of insect projects, that sort of thing. Stall Catchers is one of the few projects on here that's not an outdoor project. It helps Alzheimer's research look at videos of mouse brains to try to determine Alzheimer's impacts. So whatever project, whatever kind of theme you're interested in, there very well could be a citizen science project out there for you. One resource to check out would be the SciStarter website. And I'm sure that's on our list that we'll send to you. They've got an awesome project finder where you can search for projects according to grade band and educational outcomes. What I love about all these projects and the citizen-based monitoring is it helps scientists put the pieces of what's happening on the planet together broadly, large scale, and in a way that even 50 years ago or even 20 years ago was unimaginable. And again, it's so motivating to students that they can put their efforts to work, their outdoor observations to work to help us understanding what's happening on the planet. So before we go into the more hands-on activities, it's always nice to pause and say, well, like, why birds? So if you have access to the chat or even the Q&A, if you have any ideas why, despite there's so many projects that are out there on many, many different things and many different ways that you could get kids outside to look at your local environment. Why might birds be an interesting, engaging way to turn kids' attention to the outdoors? Feel free to share your ideas in the chat or the Q&A. And Jordan, I am not able to see anything coming through on the Q&A. Can you give us a quick summary if anything has
Yeah,
come
so
through?
right now, one of the comments was because they are everywhere. And then as we're waiting for others that are coming in, one person said for some different things that they use for their kids outside is using trash bags as rain jackets, of course. Another attendee said, hey, birds can be colorful and fun to look at. Birds can be easy to spot.
All great answers. I mean, when you're looking at this picture, they are colorful and they're diverse. They have interesting behaviors. They have cool adaptations. I mean, if you just pay attention to just the beaks on these birds, you can see the thin beak of the hummingbird, the fruit-eating beak of the little toucanet, some curved beaks that are probably like honey creepers or other birds that are nectar drinkers, thicker beaks of the seed eaters, just so many adaptations. And as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking, well, those are the kinds of things that you have to teach: life cycles, adaptations, evolution, form and function, migration, phenology. There's so many content areas that you can teach through birds. But what one person said earlier, I think, is absolutely true. Birds are everywhere. They're super accessible. And also they're around year round. So here in Ithaca, it would be very, very hard for me to study insects in the wintertime because there just aren't any. But birds are here and they're still living and behaving and doing cool things, even in the winter when there's 3 feet of snow on the ground and no leaves on the trees. And here we've got a picture of a robin singing. So they sing and they fly and they're colorful. And generally kids think they're, kind of interesting and sometimes even kind of cool. So I do think that because birds are accessible year round and they change their behaviors and the kinds and numbers of species year round, they make a really cool study organism, especially at the older grade levels where you can start to see and recognize those patterns. Now, despite birds being super cool, right, there's a common affliction, and I call it bird blindness, which is all of us, myself included, kind of move through life and we don't see the animals around us. We don't see the birds around us. I call this bird blindness. And hopefully after this webinar, even if you haven't really noticed birds in the past, maybe your eyes will be just a little bit more opened. And of course, this is from Alfred Hitchcock's famous scary movie. Some people are afraid of birds, but in my mind, birds are cool and interesting creatures. As you go outside today or tonight or tomorrow, take a look around, and it would surprise me if you don't see a bird. When I was on my walk just 30 minutes around my neighborhood, I saw a turkey vulture right above my neighborhood. I saw 3 little dark-eyed juncos, and they were in a puddle taking a bath. I heard some chickadees. Like, birds are everywhere. Even if you teach in an urban school, you're going to find quite a variety of birds that might surprise you. One tool that we have is called eBird. This is a citizen science project. And so, again, to kind of reflect back on what we learned earlier, citizen science is where people collect data about the organisms that they see or the things that they're observing. eBird collects bird every bird, anywhere, anytime. And this is a picture of where we've had data coming in from across the world. So it's a global project. It looks almost like a night sky, right? But it's not. It's where the data have come in. And we're working really hard to recruit people to watch birds all across the globe so that we can get a global snapshot or good global picture of where birds are and what their populations are doing. And we're making amazing strides in engaging citizen scientists across the world. We've got 500 million observations, more than 500 million observations on over 40 million checklists from 500 million participants across the globe on over 10,000 species, which represents about 99+% of the species on the planet, every country in the world at over 2 million locations. So you can imagine the richness of this data and the conclusions we're able to draw about where birds are and when throughout the globe. Let me give you a quick highlight of what citizen science data looks like. This is a bird called the black-polled warbler. It's a little insect-eating warbler. And as we go through the year, it's going to play again now starting in January. So in the winter, it's basically in South America, in the northern parts of South America. And then it goes up and breeds in the summer, largely up in Canada. And you can see where it has migration pathways, largely through the Caribbean. And basically, the brighter the graphic is, the more birds, the more common you are to see this black-polled warbler. It's a tiny little bird, really secretive. And even if there were, 20 scientists in the US that were super interested in understanding black-polled warblers and where they're going throughout time, I can't imagine how hard it would be to come up with actual abundance data across the hemisphere. And so we rely on citizen scientists to do this. And if you're wondering, well, how old do the kids have to be to collect this kind of data? Well, you just have to tell us where you were, when you counted, and what you saw. And we've had successful data submitted from as young as kindergarten and even younger. And what I love about citizen science and these local observations is that it helps kids connect and contribute locally and globally, and their observations matter. So it's really important to them. So if you're new to birding, you might be thinking, well, how on earth am I going to get a group of my 25 fifth graders organized outside and successfully able to not only identify birds, but also count them? Well, we've got some resources that can help you not just notice the birds, but also put some names on the birds. And the main tool I'd love to share with you tonight is called Merlin Bird ID Wizard, Merlin Bird ID. And it asks you a few simple questions. The nice thing is, because your smartphone is smart, it knows where you are and it knows the date. And then step 3 is, how big was the bird? Step 4, what were the main colors? You pick up to 3. And then tell us what the bird was doing. And like magic, Merlin is going to, based on your location and your date, indicate what bird it thinks it is. And it's going to give you, anywhere from a few to maybe a dozen choices. And you just look at the pictures and say, oh, that's my bird. Oh my gosh, I saw a black-polled warbler in Ithaca, New York on June 22nd, or wherever you happen to be. So teachers love Merlin Bird ID. My daughter started using Merlin Bird ID probably better than I could at about 5 years old. So very accessible to kids. And you'll find that citizen science and Merlin Bird ID and some of these app-based programs and citizen science programs are found throughout our K-12 resources, because citizen science really is kind of an anchoring concept for our program. But what I want to move into now is some specific resources that are going to help you potentially do citizen science, but if you're not ready for citizen science, to just get your kids outside, turning their attention to nature. So the first one I want to show is called the Explorers Guidebook. It's a booklet and it just has easy outdoor hands-on activities for kids. We did this in conjunction with the Every Kid in a Park effort that former President Obama had set up about probably 6 years ago or so at this point. It's available in English and Spanish, and it was designed to help kids explore their local parks through a really easy to use thing. It's, like I said, it's a free download. It's also available on our website for $1 each if you want to print copies on sort of stiff paper that's highly portable. Let me just give you an example of some of the activities in the Explorers Guidebook. We invite you to do a sound map by listening closely to your environment. This is actually my little girl who is drawing a sound map. The cool thing about this actually was from the summer. She was doing the sound map and I was ready to go inside. You know, like we'd been out there listening for about 15 minutes and I kind of thought that I had heard everything that I was going to hear. And I went down to her as quiet as I could and said, "Oh, are you ready to go in now?" And she's like, "No, I just wanted a little bit more time." I thought, oh, wow, like my kid doesn't want the screen for more than 15 minutes. And we went inside and she said, "Mommy, I want to do that again tomorrow and compare." And I was pretty awesome. I don't think we sit down and just use our ears. You know, she had her eyes closed and was having fun listening to the things around her and obviously drawing our dog. Another fun thing is the habitat scavenger hunt, looking for the components of habitat, either at your local park or on your schoolyard or at home. I think that the Explorers Guidebook, because it is a free download, is something good for you to send home if you're in a remote learning situation. So you can use this at school, or you can ask your students to fill it out, give them a week or so to do the activities in it. Again, written at about a 4th grade level, but certainly we've had younger and older students use it. And there's just a glimpse. The page 3, the first page, the sound map idea, and then of course the scavenger hunt. And as you can see in the middle page, we encourage them to kind of do a paper version of Merlin and then to go online and or on their smartphone and use Merlin, the app. It's got the same pictures. It's kind of like a practice way of doing Merlin. And as the activities progress, you know, as there's many fun, hands-on, very, very simple activities, at the end it does encourage them to try to do a citizen science count of birds. The next activity that I want to show you is Feathered Friends. This is written also at an elementary level, probably upper elementary, probably most accessible to kids in about grades 3 through 6. We developed this in conjunction with a sponsor named Pennington. They do bird seed and bird feeders. And there are 10 monthly lessons. There are indoor and outdoor components to each of the lessons. And we set this up seasonally, such that, for example, the September lesson is what makes a bird a bird. So we start with the basics, and then we move through seasonally with the content. For each of the lessons, there's a take-home idea. And I'd encourage you to look at this too, especially if you're sort of in that 3rd through 6th grade grade band, to see if there are any things that you could pull out of here, either to do in class or possibly to send home if you're in a remote learning situation. Again, that's a free download, and we'll be sending you a link to that in that PDF that you'll get right after this. Each one is tied to the NGSS standards, there are learning objectives, and as I said, there's always a home connection, such that, you know, a note home to the families and sort of a hands-on, fun homework assignment. And as I said, there's, in most of our resources, linkages to citizen science, and Feathered Friends is not an exception to that. And the main focus of tonight's presentation, the activities I wanted to highlight, is a new a new effort that we've launched called Cooped Up Kids. And these are remote learning activities. We started these in March, as soon as everyone started working remote, especially before teachers had really figured out how to convert what would have been on in-person lessons to remote lessons. And parents were really, myself included, struggling to find content to engage our kids in those first few weeks. We started launching the Cooped Up Kids activities. We've got 10 of them out right now, and we're planning to do at least a few more this year. We're hoping to be up to 13 different lessons by the end of 2020. Again, these are thematic. The cool thing about Cooped Up Kids, in my opinion, is that we've got a lesson with facilitator instructions, and these are useful both for teachers and for parents and for environmental educators. They've been used successfully by all three types of educators. And they're scaffolded by leveled slideshows that are designed to be kid-friendly and self-guided. So while you've got the instructions, the kids are given these PowerPoints that they can go through relatively independently. So if you're, in a remote learning environment and have a Google Classroom, you can export these Google slideshows out to your students very easily. They can go through them. Most of them take between, say, 30 to 60 minutes or so, and they're leveled K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8. And all the background information and tips to the adult guides and information and links to the PowerPoints are all available on the lesson plan. And we will, like I said, send you a link to that. Let me just give you a glimpse of some of my favorite or some of the most well-received lessons for this. Now, not all of these are outdoors, but everyone includes outdoor linkages or challenges or missions. For the flight and migration, it depends on what level, if you're K2, 3, 5, or 6, 8, how we cover that content. But we talk about what is flight. We have an interactive called Flap to the Future that my daughter absolutely loves, that deals with how animals run, jump and glide, fly, and then there's even kind of a futuristic bird as well. So you can think about the adaptations for flight. And then there's, as I said, some in each of the lessons, some kind of get creative or go outside lessons. Here's a picture of my daughter. I have to pay her $1 for every photo that I take that I use. So she's earned herself another $1 tonight by being in this PowerPoint. And you can see for this, it's kind of a get creative and also can be done outdoors lesson as well. Think about wing shapes, create several paper airplanes to test out. How do the shape and length of wings change how the airplanes fly? And then this is the PowerPoint that Bella went through independently, but then in the facilitator's guide, it gives me some guided questions that I can have her write out the answers to or create kind of a podcast about or whatever you want to do. And of course, there's plenty of scaffolding within these lesson plans such that there are links out to videos of how to fold airplanes, and there are pictures of bird wings so that she can kind of explore the length and the shape of bird wings and how that is related to flight. Fun, simple, hands-on activities. Also in that migration and flight lesson, we encourage the kids to create their own migration obstacle course, indoors or out, and test it with yourself or other family members. If you're in school, you can do this as a team. If you're at home, this little girl has put up a little plastic sheeting and she's got some black on her yard for a road and some boxes for building. Then basically she set up this little migration obstacle course. And the kids have great fun with these kinds of things. Let's move on to activity 5, which is called Who's That Bird? And this is all about bird identification. Let me give you just a taste of some of the examples or slides in this. We talk about size and shape. This is probably pulled from the 6/8 version. A lot of times when you look at a bird, if you're new to birding, you're like trying to look at colors and tiny features of the bird. but we really are encouraging kids, look at the silhouette, the outline of the body. How long are the legs? How long is the neck? How long is the beak? How big is the bird in general? All of those. And even if you're new to birds and think, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about birds, you probably know whether this bird here that's changing into the silhouette is a songbird or a duck or a heron. It's a kind of heron. It's called the great blue heron, and they're super common across the US, so you've probably seen one before. You know, give the kids these types of quizzes, what bird types they recognize, and what clues they use, and all of this is scaffolded by videos and interactive experiences. You know, really having them look at the shape of the blue jay, not just the colors and sort of the behaviors, but noticing shape. So which of these do you think is the blue jay silhouette? And why do you pick that silhouette? Right? You're noticing the bulkiness of the bird, the type of crest, that kind of thing. And then, of course, after all of those sort of scaffolded experiences and videos and so forth, the kids are invited to go on their own bird walk. So grab an adult and go out on a crow not crow inspired walk. This is actually for the K2 version. We talk about what's a crow versus what's not a crow, starting at the very simplest, the simplest way we can think of to do birding. If you can't go outside, try watching from a window. We're always trying to give some examples and adaptations. Jordan, have there been any questions or anything that you want to share with me? And if anybody does have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A.
Yeah, so some people have been following along as well. Some others did answer some of your different questions about birds, talking about how birds populate. A kutzel is gorgeous. One another comment was listening for the sounds they make, etc. But yeah, as of right now, not too many questions
Okay.
really coming in. But if
Totally
they do
fine.
come up, I'll make sure to let you know
Awesome.
for sure.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'll move in then to additional Cooped Up Kids activities 2 through 4 is kind of a series on life cycles of birds. And the lesson 2 or activity 2 is why is spring so loud? And then life in a nest is lesson 3. And then activity 4 is birds growing up. So we kind of divided the life cycle in those ways: courtship, nesting, and baby birds, because kids love baby birds. So let me just pull out a few glimpses of what this series looks like and some of the activities in here. One of the things that the lab is really well known for, and perhaps some of you have used it because it's super popular among teachers right now, is our bird cams. We've got both feeder cams as well as nest cams. And we've got a number of videos that are curated. We've picked the very best, and we use those videos to illustrate different things. For example, if we're talking about incubation, well, what is incubation and why do birds incubate? We can show the birds actually coming on, how they turn the egg for the health and safety of the egg, and how they sit on the nest when it's cold and windy, and why that's important. It's an indoor activity, but you can imagine that it can be done independently by kindergartners on up through 8th grade. And it's called What's in an Egg? This is a series of probably about 6 or 7 slides within the actual PowerPoint, but we encourage the kids to do an egg dissection and give them instructions and materials on how to do that and questions to address. And then the cool thing is, especially at the older grades, we can go into some detail about the parts of the egg and encourage the kids to look at. I mean, maybe all of us have noticed that little white part of the egg when we crack an egg into a cake batter or something. You think, what is that little white part? Well, it's the chalaza, and it actually helps to stabilize the yolk and hold it in place such that the yolk doesn't touch the sides of the shell and which can cause developmental abnormalities in the chick. And I've always been pleasantly surprised when I've done this in person with kids, like how much they get into the egg dissection. And just, you know, it's cracking a chicken egg, but man, they will start to see all the parts in there, and it's really fascinating for them to think about what's in an egg. For the outdoor components of this, there's a number of things that we've done. I am always surprised how much kids love going outside and trying to build their own nest with grass and twigs and leaves and pine cones, and even 8th grade boys, who I think are some of the hardest to engage humans on the planet, will spend an amazing amount of time trying to build a nest that will hold some fake eggs or rocks or whatever. Now, if you can't go outside, we have some inside options as well, you know, using things like popsicle sticks and pipe cleaners and that sort of thing. But again, this is independent work, and kids do it on their own time. And they basically, the questions are, how did it feel to build your own nest? How do you think birds do it? Wow, they don't have opposable thumbs. They're doing it with their beaks, and so on and so forth. And of course, we've got videos of birds building nests and the slideshows and all of that stuff. Sound map is also found in this, in the Why is Spring So Loud? This is probably a K2 version of the sound map, but we rewrite the instructions and the materials and make adaptations as needed for the 3.5 and 6.8 version as well. So that kind of concludes the section on Cooped Up Kids. As I said, there are 10, I think soon to be 11 lessons in that series, and there will be 13 by the end of 2020 if Susan and I can get them done fast enough. And encourage you to check them out. They're not tied to the standards, but they are thematic. So if you've got some themes that you want to cover, you'll find quite a variety in there. And the last thing I really want to highlight about all of this, whether it's getting the kids outside through the Explorers Guidebook, through citizen science, through the Feathered Friends curriculum, through Cooped Up Kids, is that countless teachers have basically said, taking kids outside and letting them observe birds, especially over time, is such a great way to motivate them to ask scientific questions. And I'd also like to share with you our curricula. It's called Investigating Evidence. It's a full-fledged curriculum, and it's available for a free download on our site. And we have lessons, 5 lessons that include how to observe and wonder, what is science, and then launching into how to do an investigation, testing hypotheses, data collection and analysis, and sharing out an investigation. And we've had teachers and students do very simple experiments. For example, are birds more active in the morning or the afternoon at a feeder? What kind of potato chips will gulls eat at the beach? On up to like unbelievably astute high schoolers who ask questions that are as good as some of the research that's coming out of Cornell Lab of Ornithology undergrad and graduate students. So this free curriculum includes a teacher's guide, resource pages, and journal pages for the students, and is scaffolded also by some PowerPoint presentations, all downloadable on our website. It's scaffolded also by an online course, so if you're new to outdoor learning and inquiry-based learning, this course is, I believe it's $50, and you can get CEU credit. And we also offer it for graduate credit with the graduate student fees through Drake University. So there are opportunities. Again, one of the things we want to do is provide as many free resources and awesome kit-based supplies through our partner at Nasco, and also professional development in the form of webinars like the one tonight on through online courses. So I encourage you to check out our website and the Nasco website for the materials we provide. If you feel like you need more ideas, we also launched at the beginning of COVID a Facebook group called Science and Nature Ideas for Cooped Up Kids. I'd say it's about half parents and half teachers and other environmental and educators of sorts. And you're welcome to post your questions, your ideas, and look for resources within that Facebook group. We've got, I believe it's over 2,000 members right now. And just to make a quick call out to the NASCO website, right now we've got Dissecting the Food Web Owl Pellet kit available and the Habitat Connections kit available, and more kits coming soon. And with that, if anybody would like to share in the chat window or in the Q&A any of their questions, or perhaps you have thought of, as we've been sharing tonight, any potential answers or solutions for the common concerns that I stated in the beginning that people had, whether weather related, especially cold weather or rainy weather related, or any group management practices that have maybe been successful for you in the past. I know in the initial survey, people specifically mentioned things like snow and ticks and poison ivy. So if you've got any specific solutions for those, we'd love to hear them. But I think the bottom line is, despite the potential hazards of taking kids outside, you know, if you can figure out what your local concerns or conditions are and build scaffolds around that or supports around that for your students, keeping them on trails, for example, making sure they've got warm enough clothes, maybe starting with a short, like brief visits outside that can grow longer over time. Certainly well worth it. And hopefully the resources that I've shared with you tonight can provide you with some simple ways to maybe get over the hump of not having materials. And as we wrap up, if there aren't any questions, I encourage you to keep in touch with me and my team. We have a Twitter handle and a Facebook page in addition to that Facebook group that I shared. You're always welcome to visit our website and poke around there. What I've shared tonight is probably 5% of what's available to you on our website. The lab is intensely dedicated to doing outreach through teachers to students, so really encourage you to poke around our site and find things that will work for you. And my personal email address is jms327@cornell.edu. Again, my name is Jennifer Fee, and I'm happy to serve as a resource to you if you should need any, have any questions that maybe you think of as you're beginning implementation.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jen. I definitely appreciate you taking the time today and walking through all these resources. I know a lot of the attendees, I'm getting some responses. They're saying they really love this webinar and all the different resources that you're presenting. So definitely glad that you guys can take the time to present all this. I did want to mention that I did upload that PDF in the handout sections on the control panel. So all those links that I've been sharing along the way, in the chat feature, I did want to make sure that everybody knew that also you can go to that handout section, get that PDF, and then they have all the different links that for the resources that Jen's been referring to. Feel free to check that out and peruse. And that, just as Jen was saying, this is just a taste of what they have available to you as far as resources. We want to make sure to give you the tools and to help empower you and then help you facilitate this learning outdoors. So I've definitely, when you have a chance, get a chance to look at that and review it. We'll wait on for another couple minutes here to see if there's any other different questions that might pop up through the question tabs. I know there's sometimes a little bit of a lag between, or as you're writing down, it might take a little bit for you to actually write down your question. But Jen is always open to different questions too, or even if you have some of your own students that you're saying, well, I have this one student that maybe with special education needs or things, what are some just suggestions maybe that you might have, things of that nature. Just trying to think of ways to maybe have her, because she is live right now and she's willing to communicate with you and to be able to help you as a resource. So With that said, I'm going to wait a couple minutes here just to kind of see if any other different questions kind of come in here as well. And I'm not sure if Susan wanted to add anything to this as well. So.
Yeah, Susan, did I miss anything? Because you're the one that came up with this awesome handout. So hopefully I did everything right.
You nailed it, Jen. The only thing I didn't nail was including your email at the end. So if you could, maybe if you wouldn't mind putting that up in case anybody does want to get a hold of you directly.
Absolutely. Well, I do appreciate everybody coming tonight. Hope that the resources we've presented to you are useful, and yeah, let us know how we can help. We're here to support you, and this is absolutely our passion. Let me see. Is that showing the contact information now?
Yep, yeah. It is.
Awesome.
Yep. All right.
I
and
also mention, I think I'm doing another webinar with you, Jordan, on Monday on the owl pellet kit. So if any of you are interested in owl pellets or do that in your classroom and are looking for new ways or insights, you might want to look on NASCO's website and register for that webinar on Monday.
Yep, and it's going to be at the same start time. It's going to be 4 p.m. Central Time, or that's 5 p.m. East Coast, or it's going to be 2 p.m. West Coast. So just to kind of give you a range, there's a lot of different webinars. And if you really enjoy this one and you said, hey, you know what, Jen, we really like this. Could you do maybe a little bit on this topic or that topic? Shout out and let us know, and then we can see if maybe we can add that also to other future webinars as well. We always love our feedback. Don't forget that there's a survey after this, after you leave. Make sure to fill out that information. That kind of helps us, again, gauge your interest in other different topics that you might be interested in. And then as you start to use some of those resource tools that they have there, if you're kind of curious as, well, maybe how do I integrate that, or maybe I've never used this before, there's definitely ways to reach out to us, and we can kind of help you along the way as well. So
absolutely. That's my job. That's literally my job, to help you guys. So let me know.
Absolutely. And too, as you get on if you want to go on your social handles and share some different activities that you use from this curriculum, feel free to do that too. They always love to have other advocates for their program. They're a nonprofit organization. They do lots of great things for citizen science and other different educators. So they always are welcome to others sharing their different activities that they have there and using their resources. So I'm going to look really quickly to see if we have any other different questions. I'm not seeing any, Jen. So
awesome.
I think
I just nailed it, right?
Yeah, right out of the bat.
Yeah, Jordan, one more thank you to you for coming up with this idea and allowing us to present to via this format tonight. I really appreciate it and enjoyed it.
All right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Hopefully we see you on Monday. Make sure to look out for that email that's coming out. And then if you haven't registered already, you can reach out to Jen or reach out to me. My email address is engage@nascoeducation.com. That's where we have all of our communication with all of our different professional development webinars. So again, thank you guys for everybody. Enjoy your night, stay warm, stay safe, and we hope that you get some useful tools from this webinar. All right.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.